Hey, this is Ryan Jones with serverlessguru. In this video, we're going to be covering Firebase hosting. So if you're familiar with Amazon S3, you can do static hosting on there. I actually think that the Google offering has some leg up on S3 static hosting, but let's go ahead and jump into the documentation, and I'll talk about why I kind of think that. So as we know with S3 static hosting, and if you don't know what static hosting is, I'll explain it right now. Static hosting is basically you have an HTML, you have a CSS file, you have a JavaScript file, and let's just say it's that. It could be as simple as just having an HTML file, just index.html. You put it onto a bucket, and then you basically enable static web hosting, and it's live to the internet, right? So then you can have people come to it, they can actually see your website. You didn't have to start a server, you didn't have to install Apache or do anything like that. It just works. So you can build more complex apps by adding in obviously CSS or JavaScript files. And then actually, if you want dynamic content, like let's say you want to connect to a database, you don't actually need a server for that either. You can use static web hosting that just makes API calls to your database or to your cloud functions. And then those cloud functions can talk to your MySQL database, or your Postgres database, or your MongoDB database, or your DynamoDB, or your Firestore, any database that you want. It can also make external API calls to different services, or even hit your own servers from there. But yeah, static web hosting is very powerful, and it's kind of where every website, basically a lot of websites are moving in this direction because it really lowers the amount of cost. And there's also other benefits, which we'll find out in just a second. So yeah, basically it's a web app without any hassle. And there's even stuff where you can do a React app and you can actually build it, or even an Angular app and build it, and then actually host it using static web hosting using a compiled file. And so that's really powerful. There's also with this is that, and this is the difference of why I said that I was kind of impressed with the Firebase hosting offering, is that it has SSD-backed hosting around the globe. So one big thing is that because Google's infrastructure is what you actually end up using when you're using Google Cloud to most degree, to the most extent, basically your content is being hosted on SSDs with Firebase hosting. So it's delivered fast, and it says that files are deployed to Firebase hosting are cached on these SSDs at CDN edge servers around the world. So what that basically means is that your content's going to get to where it needs to go a lot faster by using Firebase hosting. This is a cool part. You also get free SSL certificates for custom domains. So you had your own domain, let's say www.mypie.com, right? Or something like that. Basically, you make pies, you're a bakery place, I don't know. You can basically get a free SSL certificate, so your site's HTTPS, just by doing a little bit of verification stuff, right? So probably not a lot of steps, something like, is this your domain? If it's like GoDaddy, or editing some like text file in your routing files. So basically it's a very simple, painless way to get SSL and get HTTPS for your website without having to go through another process that you would have had to gone through 5 years ago, for example. And then you can deploy with one command. So this is cool. With S3, the difference here is that when you're actually using the AWS CLI to do deployments to an S3 static web hosted website, you're actually writing AWS S3 sync, and then you're pointing it at a local folder that has like your build. So that has your index.html, your compiled JavaScript, and your CSS file. Then it's syncing that to that S3 bucket where your website is being hosted from, and that'll update your website. The only thing with that though is that to do things like versioning, to do rollbacks, it takes a lot more, basically it takes manual scripting, and you have to come up with processes that actually support that. With this though, is that with the Firebase hosting, it comes with a one command solution to that, where you can deploy your app from a local directory directly to the web with one command. And this is the part that I thought was really interesting, is that you can see deployment history, right? So if you deploy once and then twice and then 3 times, the third time it breaks, they actually have deployment history in the console where you can roll back to a previous version just by going to the Firebase console and clicking rollback. Whereas if you didn't have versioning on S3 for your static website, what would happen is that you couldn't just roll back to that last version. You would basically lose it because it would just overwrite. And so this is a cool way of doing it. The other thing too is that even if you had versioning on that bucket, each file has its own version. So you would have to go through and update backwards to that last version or write some custom solution to handle that. And so this is out of the box functionality. And so I think that based on this, if I was creating a static website, I would probably be using Firebase hosting. And also it comes with the full Firebase suite as well, and that's pretty awesome as well. So if I wanted to use like MLKit or Firebase authentication, or if I wanted to hook into the cloud storage using the SDK and not have to write my own custom like Lambda functions or APIs to handle this functionality, Firebase has it built in. And so why not use it, right? It scales. It's kind of a fully managed solution. It fits into that serverless model where you're not having to manage containers or you're not having to manage servers. And it's also pay for usage. So yeah, so this is a really good example of Google doing something to kind of be different a little bit than the way that Amazon has done it. I personally came from an Amazon background, so moving to Google, I've had to kind of rethink how I look at stuff. And this is a good example of where I would choose Firebase hosting over S3 static hosting. So yeah, this was Ryan Jones with Serverless Guru. Thanks for watching. I will see you next time.